Why don't you start a little bit, because you just mentioned it, the history behind the organization, how it came to be.
Well, Boston Cecelia has quite a long history. I believe the group was founded more or less coming out of a series of concerts that led up to the centennial in 1876. So there were all these celebrations of the new republic reaching its 100th year, and so as part of that, they put together some concerts in the Boston area, and then that sort of got a life of its own and became a continuing group. And originally, it was called the Cecelia Society of Boston, and there was sort of this movement of Cecelia societies in England, and some sprung up in America as well. I think there's one in DC, for example. And so the group's been going quite a long time, obviously, and it's had different conductors over the years and kind of different focuses. When it started out, it was a pretty big group. I think it had at least a couple hundred people, and actually, it was when it started, it was sort of a members-only affair. You had to apply, and then you were accepted. And all the concerts were free, except that you needed an invitation to attend. So it was very much sort of part of Boston high society to start, I think. And then they decided, well, it's actually that's an interesting model, but it's hard to, when you're not charging for concerts, that's a lot of money you're not getting. It's hard to actually necessarily fund all of the music that you might want to do, and maybe hard to recruit audience as well if you're just inviting everyone personally. So after, I think, 15 or maybe 20 years of that model, they switched to sort of a more normal, like, where it's a nonprofit group that puts on concerts and charges admission and etc. So they dropped the invitation only aspect of it and moved on to being a sort of more traditional performing arts organization in the late 19th century. And that's ever since. I've been sort of rereading some of the history from that period, and it's fascinating that they still had some of the same troubles back then. They still couldn't find people to sing tenor, and but Cecelia had, for a while, Cecelia in the 1930s and 40s, Cecelia was sort of the official choir, the chorus of the Boston Pops. So it was conducted by Arthur Fiedler, and then kind of under the overall direction of Serge Koussevitzky. And so Arthur Fiedler was the chorus master. And then after the war, that was disbanded, and the Pops decided that they wanted to have every concert, well, for a number of concerts a year, because they wanted to be able to program whatever they felt like. And so that was actually kind of devastating to the city at the time, but had really grown into being the chorus for the Boston Pops being their main mission. And it took quite a while for the group to kind of recover from that. And that recovery really happened in 1968 with the appointment of Donald Teeters as the music director. And that's really where the connection to Brookline comes in, because Don was also the music director at the All Saints Episcopal Church, All Saints Parish, which is on Beacon Street in Brookline. And I think because of his connection to the church, the rehearsals moved to the parish music room, and that's where they've been ever since. So
I was going to ask, is that where the group typically practices or performs?
both of those things. So almost all of the preparatory rehearsals are done in the music room at All Saints, and that's been going on for 50 years now. And we also have a number of concerts there every year. And I think in recent years more so than before, but we usually do I would say at least 2 concerts a year at the church at All Saints. And one of them would be at Christmas time, a sort of the winter concert, and then at least one at another time, either in the spring or the fall. And it's not unusual for us to have more concerts there as well, just because it's so that's kind of our home base now is All Saints Parish in Brookline.
How did you get involved with the organization?
I just found the group originally just through an ad in the Boston Globe. I did know a woman that I went to college with and sang in the choir was in the group. So that I sort of heard of it vaguely from her association with it, but really it was just an ad in the paper, and they sort of said, here are the pieces that we're going to be doing this year. And those sounded like really exciting pieces. They were doing the oratorio by Handel called Israel in Egypt, and the St. Matthew Passion of Bach. And those are 2 things that I just adore. Both those pieces are fantastic. And so it's like, oh man, I got to do this. So I auditioned, and against the director had to think about it, but he decided to give me a chance. And I never looked back. And I became, fairly close with Donald Dieters over the years, and he recruited me to the choir at All Saints as well. So since the late 1990s, I've been singing. I've been coming to the church, 4 times a week, twice for Boston Cecelia and twice usually I guess it's once a week for Boston Cecelia, but sometimes twice if there's a concert or something. But come for rehearsals for both the secular group, the Cecelia, and then the choir as well, and come for services on Sundays.
And you mentioned this a little bit earlier because you just switched music directors. So what's that transition been like, and what does that mean for the group?
It's been difficult. There's no 2 ways about it. I mean, I think our previous music director, Dr. George Case, made a personal decision to relocate out of Boston. He's moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so we just, we had a search process, and we appointed Dr. Michael Barrett to be our new music director. But of course, because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to meet in person. We've had all of our meetings online, just like this, over Zoom. And so we've been able to socialize relatively well, but unfortunately, singing together over the internet is really just not really possible. You just don't get the same kind of experience, and so I think we're all sort of on the edge of our seats, like wanting to get back together to hear each other in person and kind of really come together as a group. Luckily, Michael Barrett is a wonderfully warm and congenial person, and I think sort of, as I said, the social aspects have been great, and the group getting together kind of on a weekly basis just to talk, more to talk and socialize and connect with each other. That's been really helpful and important for people that otherwise are, just staying in their houses and not not getting that kind of connection. So the musical mission of Cecelia has been difficult to kind of maintain during the COVID time, but the social aspect of it has been very important to our members, and that continues.
Are the members typically very close in the group?
People become friends, and sometimes friends recruit their other friends. So we're absolutely a very congenial, warm-hearted bunch, and we love welcoming new people in and getting to know them. But the primary mission of the group really is not a social one, it's a musical one. So it's not a requirement by any means to participate in that way. And certainly the membership of the group is by, you get into the group by auditioning. You can't just say, I'm a nice person, you should let me be in. The music director has to agree that you can contribute in a musical way.
Could you actually walk me through that audition process? Where do you typically recruit? Like you said, a lot of people kind of invite friends, but do you actively recruit and look for singers?
So we typically have auditions at the end of the season and before the beginning. So we would have some auditions in June, and then more auditions usually in August or September. And we try and publicize those as best we can on things like the Boston Singers Resource, and we used to put ads in the Boston Globe. That's how I got in, as I said. And but I don't think we do that anymore. And we try and people know about us, like voice teachers, some of the other conductors in the area, college conductors. We try and reach out to people who could be on the lookout for singers who are, maybe transitioning from being in school. Maybe you're a young professional who's moved to the area and you sang in your college choir, or you went to a music school and did some voice. That's kind of the but we're an audition group, but we're an amateur group. That is, we don't pay our singers. We often perform with instrumentalists, and in that case, we almost always hire professional players. And we also would hire professional soloists sometimes. Sometimes we have members of the chorus who sing a solo, and sometimes we hire someone to do that. So yeah, our principal, as president, I'm kind of more aware of the budget, how the things go there, but our principal expenses every year are the music director, the salaries of the music director, and then paying professional instrumentalists or players to be part of concerts, or our accompanist is a professional as well. So,
and being a nonprofit organization, I assume it's kind of a struggle with funds and getting funding. So you receive monetary donations from people?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think like every nonprofit performing arts group in town, we're no exception, where the ticket sales cover, I don't know, 35% of our operating budget or something. So it's helpful for sure, but we can't, in order to actually make the ends meet and have a continuing organization, we're dependent on donations from individuals, and grants from foundations or corporate donations. Those are a small part of it, though. It's almost all individual donors in our case, and some of those are members, some of those are former members, and then some are are people who are in the audience, or so a wide variety, and of course we have a lot of the work of the Cecelia has a board of directors, and a lot of the work of the board is spearheading that effort every year to raise enough money to keep the organization going. We also have a small endowment that got set up around 2000 as part of a Mass Cultural Council sort of campaign, where we got was really fantastic, where we got a bunch of matching funds from the state, and that's really helped us. So unfortunately, the state of Massachusetts has significantly cut back their arts funding overall, and so as of now, it's been a long time since Cecelia got any support from the state of Massachusetts.
Well, how have you seen the Brookline community give back to Cecelia? Because obviously you practice, you perform for the community. The community members, have they ever given back to you?
Absolutely, of course. A huge, a really core part of our audience and our donors are Brookline residents. Some of them, live around the corner from the church there and have been coming to concerts for years. Some of them are a little further afield, but are, just lovers. Brookline is just such a great town. It's just so full of people who love the arts and participate in them and are benefactors to them. And so Cecelia, I think, is no exception as being the recipient of the generosity of both financially, but equally importantly, just their attention and involvement.
Has the group done any specific shows or concerts or kind of volunteer efforts with Brookline?
As far as our kind of outreach of nonprofit, I'm not sure that the things that we've done have been in Brookline. It's just turned out we've performed in senior living places, but on the North Shore, for example. But it just hasn't worked out in the town of Brookline. We did have a few years ago, we had like a poetry contest as part of a concert, and we got a lot of submissions from kids at the high school. That was pretty fun. I would say it's a great community to be part of, but I think our aspirations of being the Boston Cecelia is just kind of wider. Like we view ourselves as being a group in the Boston area and including, Boston and Cambridge and the wider community. And we love our home in Brookline, but and our place at All Saints, we do try and give out tickets every year to members of the parish as part of our, them being our host. And so in that way, we're part of, that's one effort that we have. That's just to our sort of local community, but that's through the church.
Yeah. So where else does Cecelia perform outside of Brookline and Boston, if you have gone outside of Boston?
Right. So we do have regular concerts downtown at the Church of the Advent in Beacon Hill and at Jordan Hall at the New England Conservatory. And we've also performed at many of the other big churches there, like Emmanuel and Old South, and also in Cambridge, Sanders Theater and First Church on Garden Street, and recordings at Mechanics Hall in Worcester. I think they probably had a concert or two in Worcester as well before I joined the group. And for a while we did some things. Our music director before, in the sort of 2012 to 2017 period, was Nicholas White, and he had a position at the St. Paul School up in New Hampshire. And so we did a number of events up there, concerts that involved either where we just use the space at the school, or maybe involve the kids a little bit in our concert.
Like, so you record live shows and you put them on the internet?
Oh, well, so this was for a studio recording. We recorded a series for Non-Such Records of an American composer named Daniel Pinkham. So we performed, I think, pretty much his, I don't know, he probably wrote a lot of stuff. We made a recording of his cantatas of various kinds. He had written a fair amount of choral music, and so it was both, and some of it was just his instrumental things, so the choir didn't sing on those, but and then we made another record. We did 3 recordings for Non-Such. One of the Daniel Pinkham things, one of an Italian and then later American composer, Menotti, Giancarlo Menotti. I'm trying to remember his first name. Anyway, who was a mid 20th century composer. And we did a recording of a lesser known work of his called The Unicorn, the Manticore, and the Gorgon, I think it's called. It's really
interesting,
bizarre sort of fable of music and art. And then we did another recording of our own kind of Christmas classic music like the Britain Ceremony of Carols. So those were recorded professionally, and there was a while where you could go to a music store and buy them. So that was, since then we've recorded our concerts for a long time, and we have a pretty extensive library of concert recordings going back to 1968 or something. And I actually have a sort of another hat that I wear where I'm the recording archivist of the group. So I have boxes full of reel-to-reel tapes in my house, and a big library of I've been working on getting those digitized, and so we try and have a sort of digital archive of stuff going back a long time, but it has a lot of holes in it. There were a lot of concerts that were wonderful concerts that no one can find the recordings of anymore. And then sometimes even more recent ones, sometimes you can't get the rights. Like if you perform in Jordan Hall, sometimes you can't get the recording rights to your own recording, which is frustrating. Like we did this wonderful concert in collaboration at Jordan Hall of the Brahms German Requiem, and I'm not sure where the tape of that is, but we don't have it.
Wow. What are some other struggles that you run into with being in this leadership role, or any other struggles? You mentioned something about finding tenors earlier.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think, the tenor voice is something like 10% of men are actually tenors, and the rest are baritones and basses. So the numbers are working against you there. And I've certainly found choral singing in general has become less popular with men in the last, I think I've really noticed that over the last 20 years. It's so when we do have these auditions, we usually have a long, we're constantly having to turn away wonderful women singers, sopranos especially, and then because we just don't have room in them to keep our group balanced and good. And whereas we have many fewer people apply to us to sing bass and tenor. Yeah, I mean, of course, right now we're struggling with what to do during the pandemic. Unfortunately, and kind of incredibly, choral singing is one of the most dangerous things you can do. We all heard of the story of this choir in the state of Washington, where before anybody kind of knew how easy it was to transmit COVID-19, they had a rehearsal, and some huge percentage of the choir all got sick. Like,
Wow.
out of a group of, now they had a big choir, they had like 100 people in the choir, but of them, I don't know, 60 people or something came down with it eventually. It was really shockingly large number of folks. And I may be wrong on the specifics, so you'll forgive me if you want to fact check. But I think once we heard about that, in general, people who are in choruses have been thinking that in some ways one of the, maybe the last thing to come back is going to be choir singing. Just because it's so, if you have someone who is transmitting, you can spread it to a lot of folks. So we've been trying to think about what we can do right now to kind of keep the group alive and keep our contact with our community, our audience community alive. And it's really difficult. You can do projects where you do like what's called a virtual choir, where you sing in your own house and you try and mix the audios and videos together. But it's not the same. It's a different skill. It's more like making a multi-track recording, the way you would make a pop music record, like lay down one track at a time. It's not the same as singing in a choir, where choir singing is all about listening while you're singing and singing together and reacting together. And that's what makes it kind of magical when you're in it. And so even if you can make a record you can make a recording that sounds pretty good, it's not nearly as satisfying for the singers, because you don't have the personal kind of magic experience of singing in concert at the same time and feeding off that collective energy and hearing the collective breath and the collective entrance. And it's just a special thing. It's just, if you get hooked on it, there's nothing like it.
How has Boston Cecelia impacted you personally?
Part of it has been these magic moments, like being on stage in Jordan Hall with a world-class orchestra playing, and incredible world-class soloists performing, and then, the choir kind of trying to rise to that challenge and participate and do your absolute best to make the magic of really high quality music happen. So there have been just individual moments over the years that have just been just personally super satisfying and wonderful. And that's kind of, but then there's also just the relationships you build and the good friends that you have. And the challenges of trying to keep it going. I remember a couple of years ago, we were trying to put together our annual fundraising gala. We have the sort of formula that a lot of groups use, where you have a big party and have a lot of food and a little entertainment, and hopefully maybe an auction and motivating speeches, and you sort of lay it all on one night to hope to raise the money to keep you running for the next year, or even in our case, we do it every 2 years. And, as that's coming up, you're working really hard to put the event together, and you have this kind of feeling of dread and panic in your stomach, like, what if nobody comes? What if nobody, gives any money? And then, so you feel like literally ill waking up the morning of, just feeling, but then it all comes together. And of course, and people are committed to it and very generous of their time and money. And so it's a great feeling of relief and optimism when you come out the other side and see that you have, what you're going to need to keep going. So it's very gratifying to succeed with that.
Would you say that's the most rewarding aspect of working with the group?
I think it comes down to the concerts, though, or the thing. That's really where it all comes together. It's not. That's where you really cement your relationship with the audience. So the fundraising part is necessary, and it's something that someone like me who's the president, you take on for a few years, but then you go back to just being a singer. The choir, the chorus is full of former presidents, people who did that for 2, maybe 3 years, and then went back to their spot in the soprano section or wherever. So I'm only the latest. And probably after next year, I'll go back to my spot in basses, and it'll be somebody else's turn to row the thing forward.
So with your concerts, what do they typically look like, and how do you see your audience members reacting to your performances?
When an audience comes together and there are enough people, it's like suddenly there's just all this energy that everyone can feel. The audience can feel it. The chorus can feel it. I mean, you can look out. Sometimes you can see people, but sometimes lighting, you can't really see them. But you can still, you feel their excitement and energy and their applause, or just the way they're breathing. I don't know what it is. Where humans are amazing at reading little tiny cues and experiencing it together. So something happens when you've got an audience that's really engaged and really connects with the music, and it kind of punches up the performance of the choir a lot. So a lot of times what happens is that you've been singing something, it's pretty good, you think it'll be a good concert, but then in the performance with the audience, and suddenly everybody's really giving their best, it suddenly just goes to this whole other level. And that's kind of what you live for. That's the thing you want to keep coming back to.
On an extension of that, how would you say, or how have you seen, or how would you describe the power music has to bring a community together?
Yeah, I mean, I think, live music, so I think is special. Recorded music is, everybody has their own favorite things. And it's like, these are my tracks. This is like the soundtrack to my life that I listen to on my headphones or whatever all day long. I have my own personal soundtrack, and then these are the things. But when you have live music, you sort of leave that behind, and you're all together, you're all appreciating it. And of course that, I think that live music thing, that happens with all kinds of different genres of jazz or popular music or whatever. So classical music isn't unique in that way. But choirs are kind of unique in that, the classical orchestra and choir is unique in that it's not amplified. And so it has this human dimension, that there's no electricity involved. It's just, you still get that you can get that enveloping sound that just kind of, and some of that is like the literal, just, the sheer number, the size of the sound and the way it envelops you, that just like makes you think of the communal aspect of it, and so I find, so after a concert where we have like a reception or something and everybody's talking, it feels like we've come together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I certainly value we have wonderful receptions after our concerts and all kinds of great conversation that happens at them.
Yeah, it really sounds like that Boston Cecelia has built a very nice community for itself within an even nicer community, you might say.
Yeah, that's right.